So good morning. I'm really excited to be here. I am always grateful for the opportunity to talk when Jeff is out of town. So if you were coming here hoping to hear him here today, I apologize because I know you weren't coming to hear me today. So sorry about that. I'm also excited about McKnight because I've been going here for 20 years, 20 plus, and I've probably never been more excited about what the church is doing than I am right now. We are just doing some amazing things, and I am just so excited to be a part of where we're going, and I hope you are too. I'm also really excited because this time of year, I get excited about Christmas. Anybody else get excited about Christmas? My kids better raise their hands over there. You're excited about Christmas? Yes, more pet shop stuff, right? I love Christmas. I love the lights. I love the preparation. I love the tree. She loves Santa. I do too. Did you come to breakfast with Santa? Hey, let's go with it. Did you come to breakfast with Santa? Oh, now she ignores me. Okay. I'm excited about Christmas. And I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time preparing for Christmas, putting up the lights, putting up the tree. Sometimes we wrap presents. And my presents never look as pretty as the presents up here. But even a poorly wrapped present is still pretty beautiful, right? I mean, there's nothing bad about a poorly wrapped present. So even if some of the stuff sees through or the edges don't match up or it's a little bit crinkled or slightly torn, as most of my gifts end up being, they're still pretty awesome. I took a picture of my house, a little project I've been working on. Next slide. Yeah, that's just a little project I've been working on at my own home. I'm kidding, that's not my house. But man, you can't miss Christmas these days, right? People get competitive and they get crazy, and even I feel the pressure every year to add a little something to our Christmas room, because we have a Christmas room that has a Christmas tree, and each of my kids have a little bitty tree, and then the dog has a tree. They're all small. And we have lights all around the room, and every year I buy a little something to add to it because I get so excited. You cannot miss Christmas. And even Clark Griswold would be jealous these days because now we have big blow-up inflatable stuff that he didn't have in Christmas Vacation. All he had was lights. But man, I was going to a friend's house the other day and I turned the corner and there was a 25-foot Frosty the Snowman staring right at me. It kind of freaked me out. What Clark Griswold could do with the inflatable stuff, right? It'd be pretty amazing. You can't miss Christmas, but God's gifts are never that obvious. They're never quite so flashy and well noticed. Here's a picture in the next slide. That's a package that a friend of mine received via FedEx. That is a real package that was delivered. And when the driver dropped it off, he said, "Is this okay?" And my friend didn't know what to say to that question. But this looks more like what God would hide something in. Something unnoticeable, something torn, something beaten up, something you would walk by and not notice, because if I had seen a picture of that box, I would have thought somebody would be throwing it away. I wouldn't think that that was just delivered by FedEx. And the irony is that we celebrate Christmas with all its beauty and with all its lights, and yet God's gifts are never that obvious. God's greatest gift was disguised in a time of chaos and paranoia. It was delivered in rumor and scandal. It was discovered by a few outsiders and very different from what we might expect. It was disguised in a time of chaos. Jesus was born in a time of political tension and paranoia and a time of cultural confusion and change. Does it sound familiar to anything that St. Louis is going through at this time? The temptation is to be distracted by all the disguises that God's gifts come in, and to miss the hidden kingdom. Because the hidden kingdom is about relationships. It's not about systems. Someone once said in the news recently that the system is broken, and I agree. Every system's broken. And we replace this system with another system, that one's going to be broken too. And the great thing about the kingdom of heaven is that it's built on relationships, because relationships can be redeemed. Systems can't. But God chose to disguise the birth of Christ in a time of chaos and political tension and paranoia. Even King Herod was so paranoid that the rumor of a small child being born as a king made him devise a plan to kill all the newborns under the age of 2, all the males in the kingdom. Jeff talked about that last week. That's paranoid. Just the rumor of a king. And while the world wasn't watching, God disguised a seed of hope in an unplanned pregnancy. Not unplanned by God, but certainly unplanned by Mary. That was not what she expected. The birth of Christ was also discovered in a place of oppression. This neighborhood was filled with Roman occupation, Jewish resentment, and religious fundamentalism and division. What about your neighborhoods? What about your community? Is there resentment? Does it sometimes feel occupied? What about beyond your own neighborhood? What about within yourself? What about in your marriage? What about in your own heart? What about in your family, at your school, at your workplace? Do you sometimes feel the resentment? Do you feel the division and the oppression? And yet God placed the birth of Christ in the midst of all of this. And it was discovered by just a few people in a place of oppression. And while the world wasn't watching, a few discovered the seed of hope in the form of a helpless child. Because in a world that was built on power at this time, and the Romans had power over the Jews, and the Jewish religious leaders had power over the Jewish men, and the Jewish men had power over the women, and the women had power over the kids, and the kids kicked the dog. It was a power-based society, and yet God chose the most powerless, helpless thing he could find, a newborn baby, and that's where he put his greatest gift. It was different from what you might expect. If God had put me in charge of delivering his son to the world, I certainly wouldn't have done it this way. I wouldn't have done it well, but I wouldn't have done it this way. It was different than what we might expect. Jesus was considered a mamzer, which in Jewish terms is one born of a forbidden relationship or one born of questionable maternity or paternity. So no matter what we believe today about the virgin birth, there were people back then that didn't buy it. They didn't buy that this young girl who was betrothed to Joseph suddenly came up pregnant and yet claimed that she hadn't been with anybody. Joseph didn't buy it either because he was about to break up with her until an angel appeared to him and led him to not do that. It was an unplanned pregnancy, and the world questioned. And he was born amid rumor and scandal. And being a mamzer, one of questionable paternity, meant that he could inherit his father's estate, but he couldn't attend temple functions. So it's likely that he could not attend the funeral of Joseph. And so you see the fury in his voice when he talks about tearing the temple down and rebuilding it, because he was an outsider. He always was. A couple of times in Scripture, they describe him as the son of Mary. Now, in that culture, that's an insult. I would not be disappointed to be described as the son of Hazel, my mom. I would be very proud of that. But back then in Jewish times, if you described someone as the son of Mary, that was an insult because it meant we don't know who your father was, but you always described them as the son of a man. And so at times in his ministry, they would say, are you not the son of Mary? And it was a dig. It was an insult to remind him of his past. You can't be doing these great things because we don't know who your dad is. Remember, you were born in rumor and in scandal. In Luke 7, verse 31 and 32. Pardon me while I become old. Jesus says, "To what shall then I compare this generation, the people of this generation? What are they like? They're like children sitting in the marketplace and calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not weep." Can you hear the sadness in his voice? Can you see him as that child sitting on the edge, wanting to play with the other kids, and yet not getting the chance? Because he was that outsider. There was probably some well-intended mother who loved her kids very much, who once told her children, "Don't go down to Jesus' house and play because we're just not sure about that family. She might not have said that to the kids, but she's thinking that in her head. I don't know what happened at that time. She said she was pregnant. We don't know who the father was. He was born amid rumor and scandal, and he bloomed. God's gift to us are most often disguised. God chose pregnancy over politics. He aligns with the creative power of those most vulnerable and those on the margin over the violent and destructive powers of systems and statehood. Because systems are always broken, the kingdom never is. God aligns with a young man sold into slavery in Egypt. He aligns with a baby floating in the Nile River. He aligns with Rahab the harlot, who all we know about her was that she lied and she was a harlot, and yet she was included in the lineage of Christ. He aligns with the widow with 2 mites, a convicted thief on the cross, a failure in Peter, an exile in John, and we can add to the list a murderer in Paul. What are your disguises? Because you're a disguise too. And a lot of times we think that God can't work through us because we're too fill in the blank. We're too broken. We're too addicted. We're too sinful. We're too angry. We're too greedy. We're too selfish. We're too shy. We're too something. And God can't use us. But God always works beneath the disguises. And He would love to use you. If you are broken and sinful, it sounds like you're perfect for His kingdom. So don't let your disguises keep you from being a part of this hidden kingdom. God's gifts are always discovered, not given. Jeremiah 29. For I know the plans I have for you, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And then you'll call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you, and you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart, and I will be found by you. There's a lot of seeking that has to be going on. God is not going to drop Himself into your lap. God needs to be found. He needs to be discovered. While the world wasn't watching, just a few people discovered the birth of Christ. Not many, just a few. We have work to do. It will not be dropped in our laps. I want you to pay attention to the unusual things in your life because God's gifts are different than our expectations. In Mark 5, Jesus continued this unexpected work of God in His own ministry. And there's a story where Jairus, the temple ruler, humbled himself enough to come to this itinerant rabbi that didn't have a synagogue to call home and ask him for a favor. Jairus' 12-year-old daughter was to the point of death, very close to death. So he comes to Jesus and he says, "Can you come and heal my daughter?" And so they proceed to go to Jairus' house, and there's a large crowd around him. Picture just a Middle Eastern chaotic crowd, a lot of yelling, shouting. I don't know if Jesus was running, if he's walking, because this seems like it was an emergency. And on the way, Jesus stops and says, "Who touched me?" Even his disciples think that's a ridiculous question because, Jesus, look, you're surrounded by 50 people. What do you mean, who touched you? And he said, "No, somebody touched me different." And he stops and the crowd parts, and there's a woman who had an issue of blood and had suffered under the care of many doctors for many years. And what she thought is, if I could just get close enough to Jesus and just touch the hem of His garment, I can be in and out. Don't want a conversation, don't want to talk about my problem. I don't want to be noticed. She was tired of being noticed because if you can imagine being a Jewish woman with an issue of blood, she had been unclean for years. An outsider, someone who couldn't be an insider. So what Jairus wanted was a healing. What she wanted was a quick healing and in and out, but no relationship. And then Jesus stops and talks to her, initiates a conversation with her. And what she's getting is a relationship. Now, if I'm Jairus on the side, aren't you a little angry at this point? That Jesus is stopping to take care of a chronic condition while your daughter lays near death. That would be like a doctor dealing with a headache while somebody is bleeding out of an artery. It's malpractice. It's certainly different than what we expect. And while he's having a relationship with this woman, which is what she did not want, someone comes up and says, "Don't bother the teacher. Your daughter is dead." And that's when Jesus says, oh, let's go. Man, I want to punch that guy if I'm Jairus. I do. I'm angry. And Jesus goes to his house, puts out the mourners, grabs the little girl by the hand and says, honey, get up. And everyone's so stunned, Jesus has to remind them that she might need a drink of water or a sandwich. And so what the woman wanted was an in-and-out healing. What she got was a relationship. What Jairus wanted was a healing. What he got was a resurrection. All I know is that we never get what we expect in this relationship with God. Things never go the way you plan them to go. Things certainly have not gone the way I planned them to go since I was in college. You kind of have an expectation or a dream for your life, and man, did they not go that way. But it's been so much better. The unexpected ways of God are always better than what we can come up with. I want you to watch for the burning bushes in your life. Moses was in a desert, and at that time the desert was pretty empty, and he saw a burning bush. And it was so unusual, he had to go over and check it out. Because this bush was burning, but it was not being consumed. It kept on burning and burning. I want you to watch for the unusual things in your life. You will be rewarded if you do. I once had a woman call up CFS to talk to me about one of my presentations, and she wanted to speak to me about it because she didn't think it was very good. And that was pretty unusual. Matter of fact, it was so unusual, I went over to have a conversation with her because she asked to talk with me. And what it began was a 2-year relationship where about every 2 weeks we got together and she became my mentor. And she was a fantastic woman with tons of knowledge. She was a therapist. She had experienced and learned more than I could ever imagine. And she mentored me for the next 2 years. And so I think, what if I had hung up the phone that day? Because I didn't want to go talk to somebody who wanted to criticize me. That didn't sound like a lot of fun. I would have missed out on a tremendous opportunity. We need to watch out for the burning bushes in our life. And so what do we do? Here's your challenge today. We hope. We dream of a better day. The birth of Christ, if it's about anything, it's about hope. And here's your challenge. Your challenge is to dig. Dig beneath the disguises to find God's hidden gifts. You have to dig beneath the color of a man's skin. You have to dig beyond his political beliefs. You have to dig beneath his socioeconomic status. You have to dig beneath his religious beliefs. You have to dig through the pile of your own beliefs to put new wine into new wineskins. You have to dig beneath your religion to find this hidden Jesus. We have to discover. We have to discover the hidden God working in our lives and in others' lives in the most unusual and unexpected ways. We have to dare to believe that the impossible still happens. Mary did all these things. She had to dig through her own fears and her own anxieties about what she was being called to do. She knew that there would be questions and rumors and rejection. And yet she dug beneath all those to find a great gift. She discovered the hidden God working in very unexpected ways for her. And she dared to believe that the impossible can still happen. While the world isn't watching, I challenge you to dig and discover, to dare, and to hope. I'll close with a reading from Isaiah 41, which describes the impossible that God still does. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you. When the poor and the needy seek water, and there is none, when their tongue is parched with thirst, I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers on the bare heights and fountains in the midst of valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. I will put in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia, the myrtle, and the olive. I will set in the desert the cypress and the plane and the pine together, that they may see and know, and may consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord has done this. The Holy One of Israel has created it. God bless.